Hello, it's John Bauman. Here is a sample multiple choice question related to public choice. As you can see, the question asks, which of the following is a recognized disadvantage of a government according to public choice theory? Feel free to read all the answers A through F. You can pause the video right now and see if you know what the right answer is. Alright, so let's take a look here. We can actually, after you read all the questions, you probably can figure out, and you can also see from our text, that all of the above is the correct answer here. So let's take a look at all of these choices here. In A, it says government regulators have friends and former colleagues in the industry. In order to become a regulator for a government, you have to have a knowledge of the industry. You know, if you become a regulator of oil drill companies, oil companies that do drilling in the Gulf Coast or fracking or what have you, you have to have a certain amount of expertise, and most likely you will have worked in the industry. You will probably have friends and former colleagues still working in that industry. The other thing is that regulators, when they do their regulation, they have to go on the premises and they get to know the people that work for the companies. Sometimes they get taken out and get certain perks, and there's a certain bias then in their decision making. So they don't always enforce the regulations and the laws very efficiently, and that's why in a lot of industries you will see that some of these companies get into trouble because they haven't been regulated efficiently. Choice B says the government is non-profit and therefore workers have less incentive to work efficiently. This is true for all non-profits, and there tends to be less incentive for government workers to do a good job. Not that all government workers are lazy, there are some excellent ones, but a lot of government workers have job security. There's no bottom line, there's no profit motive. Government will collect taxes no matter what, and so therefore the civil servants working for the government, a good percentage of them don't always work as efficiently as they could be working. Choice C, non-profits tend to spend remaining money at the end of their fiscal year. So this is typical of all non-profits, including the government. If somebody works for a particular department and there is $30,000 left at the end of the fiscal year, let's say the government's fiscal year ends August 31st, and during the month of August there's $30,000 left, the supervisor in that department will probably ask his or her workers whether they want to spend that $30,000. Now, if it does not get spent at the end of the year, they will probably lose the money because the person supervising that department will say, well, you didn't need that $30,000 last year, so we don't have to put it in the budget for this coming year. So there's actually an incentive for managers and workers to spend down any budgeted money. If they did have savings, they wouldn't want to show any surplus money because it would decrease their budget. They would actually get penalized. So this is quite inefficient, especially if that $30,000 is not spent on very necessary, essential things. Perhaps the workers say, well, I could take a trip somewhere, go to a conference, or maybe I'll get a new printer, even though my printer is not really broken. So there's a lot of waste that takes place. And this tends not to happen as much in businesses because businesses have a bottom line and they're operating for profit. Choice D, politicians tend to make decisions that favor the short run. Well, elections are frequent. Every 2 years we have new elections. Every 4 years a new president gets elected. And a lot of times this election time comes up quickly. And so politicians want the economy to look good quickly within the next year or 2 years or what have you. And if there's a choice that they need to make that's either going to favor the short run or the long run, they will favor making the decision for the short run. For example, if politicians say we need to have a stimulus package, let's spend $700 billion to make the economy look good in the next year or 2 years, they might approve that because it will make the economy look good. And then when the election comes around, the politicians will look good, and the incumbents, all the politicians that are currently in office, most of them will get reelected. Now, $700 billion might increase the national debt, but that is usually a long-term negative and long-term disadvantage. Inflation also is a long-term disadvantage. We don't usually see that showing up until years later, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later. And so politicians will ignore those long-term disadvantages because of the fact that they want to get elected quickly. Choice E, politicians form alliances. So let's say you're in Congress and you've got some friends in Congress and you want to get a certain project approved that is going to help your state. Let's say you're a representative from Florida and there's a certain project that Congress needs to vote on. You might say, well, guys, if you vote for my project that's going to benefit Florida, if there's another project that's going to be voted on later that's going to help your state, then you can be sure that I will support you. Now, these might be projects that are not necessary, or perhaps if we have a big national debt, we shouldn't be spending all that much money. But politicians form these alliances. They say, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. And before you know it, we have huge expenditures, an increasing national debt, because politicians work together, they form alliances like on those reality shows that you see on television. And it's not necessarily the most efficient way to do things. So, choice F, all of the above, is the correct answer.